Hi, welcome to Turning with Physical Limitations. I'm Andy Sullivan, and beside me right here is Troy, Alan, and Brent. And Troy is an expert in turning, and he'll be talking to you about turning seated. And I do a lot of work. I'm blind, and I do a lot of work with other folks that are blind like myself in turning. And here we have Mr. Allen, and he is an IT professional wonder. And Brent is very wonderfully with his business, created a lot of things for people like ourselves that have physical limitations. So I think he's a great addition to the panel. And I'm going to start with Mr. Troy. Just tell us a little bit about what you do.
I had a rock climbing accident in 2008. I fell 20 metres and broke my back. I'm a carpenter by trade and enjoyed woodworking at school and making cabinetry and those types of things. I had a friend whose dad was a woodturner, and he came to me and said, well, have you tried woodturning? There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do it sitting down. So we got a mini lathe from the club, and we built a stand out of some plywood and some MDF and just put it down a bit lower, and I started turning. And it took me a year or two to start really turning, to really get the bug and get a lathe set up at home and start turning, but after that I haven't really looked back. It wasn't long after I started turning and going to some of the hands-on events and starting putting pieces into instant galleries that I started to see that some of the work I was doing was as good, if not better, than a lot of the people that were putting work into the instant galleries. In another year or so, I think I won a prize or got a placing in one of the instant galleries, and Terry Scott and Dick Veach urged me to enter one of the big national shows, the Royal Easter Show, which is New Zealand's biggest art competition, and it's one of New Zealand's biggest wood turning competitions. So I entered that, and I won two second placings in two categories. So after that, it really boosted my confidence, and I thought, well, there's no reason why I can't strive to be one of the best wood turners in New Zealand, and then from there, or even possibly the world. So yeah, that's a briefing on me and who I am and what I've done over the last few years. I find one thing I like about wood turning, unlike any other sort of sports group or sports club, people with disabilities aren't put into a category. So there's no category in wood turning, or say in a wood turning competition, where I have to enter in a disabled category. I can enter against able-bodied people, because I don't see myself as disabled, I just see myself as Troy. And my legs just don't work anymore. So I'm just not very good at stairs anymore.
It's funny that you say that, Troy.
Well, talk into the microphone.
I went to Aramont. I was the first blind student accepted to Aramont School of Arts, and it was after some very heavy deliberation. And at first, the first year that I went, it was Andy the blind gal that they never had. I mean, I felt like, they should have the da 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 da, going on in the background. And now I go every year, and I'm just Andy. And I think that's what we all just want to be, is just who we are. And it's hard. It's hard sometimes because you're scared. You don't know what to say, what to do. So sometimes people just don't say anything. And I'm so grateful to the AAW for giving a platform to helping all of us, because disabilities aren't just, that I can't see or he's in a wheelchair. I mean, it could be I can't stand a long time anymore. I have back pain and I really need to sit down, so what can we do for that? I've got carpal tunnel. I mean, it doesn't have to be something so severe, but there are so many things out there that can contribute to making turning a little harder, especially as we're aging. So that's why we're here, to try to help bridge the gap a little bit. And at that, I'm going to give you on over to Brent.
Thanks, Andy.
Right into the mic.
Right into the
Yeah,
microphone.
so that way they can hear you.
Okay. I can also use my outdoor voice.
They still won't hear you.
Okay. I don't have any really prepared remarks. I would just say that one of the things as a lathe manufacturer, what we're seeing is you walk around the AAW and you may have noticed there's gray hair and no hair all over the place, and we have a really wide clientele that we try to make equipment that satisfies their needs. And what I suppose it's been, I'd have to look at the calendar, and I'd have to look at my records. It was 7 or 8 years ago now. David Ellsworth came to me, and he knew of a guy in a wheelchair, a young aspiring turner in Florida by the name of Adam Hood, who some of you I'm sure have heard of or may remember. And Adam had a motorcycle accident, and he was in a chair. And David said, this kid really wants to turn, and he needs the lathe to turn on. Can you come up with something? And we came up with, at that time, a lathe that we called the Independence. And we chose that name for reasons that you might be able to add value to. And it was made specifically for someone who was turning from a seated position, not necessarily a wheelchair, but somebody who had to sit down when they turn. And it was feature rich and expensive, and we didn't sell very many of them. But it was a lathe that was loved by those that had it. So we thought, well, how do we make this a little bit more price competitive, a little bit lower price point, get a little bit more opportunity for people to use it. And so we came up with what we call now the Scout. And I chose the name Scout because, well, a scout is someone who's out foraging for learning new things and making new things happen and learning things. You know, when you think about a scout being a Boy Scout or a Cub Scout or whatever kind of scout, the Scout, to me, I chose that name for the machine because it was out looking for turners that may not be going to turn otherwise. So I designed it around people who needed to turn from a seated position, or people who wanted a little less expensive lathe, or people who wanted a lathe that would adapt with them as they changed and adapted. So we have a stand that we put it on called the Universal Stand, and you can raise it up really tall for a tall person, and we can drop it way down for someone in a seated position. So I called, well, not called, but Troy and I are emailing about the lathe, right? So I said, I described the lathe to him, and there's one in New Zealand that he had turned on.
Used it as well.
And I said the spindle drops down to 37 inches, which is about, here. And Troy says, well, that won't work. I need it at 31.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, well, I said, well, I'll make you one off. I mean, it's kind of a found object sculpture, but I made Troy a one off, and we got it at 31 inches for him. But the idea behind the machine is that with the Universal Stand, if we have older people who are buying it, thinking that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they're going to need to be in a seated position, and all they got to do is take their lathe and drop it down and use it in a seated position. So working with people of different abilities, be they a full-time chair user like Troy, or somebody who just feels they need to sit down when they're turning because they got a back problem or a leg problem, has presented us a way to really examine how people turn and what they do. So that's a little bit about what we do and why we're here. And we got to know Andy through the AAW here, and met Andy and talked with her about what her needs are, and we've been able to provide some support to the Lighthouse Group. So
And that
I don't know if
lathe
you-
is truly a community lathe where I'm at in Tampa. And they're able to sit, we have quite a few elderly
Why don't you
that
give her that,
go to
yeah?
my school in Tampa. And at the school, we have a stand that is what he's talking about, so we can adjust it, so folks can sit down and be comfortable while they're turning, and it's a great help. So if you have a clog, even, it's wonderful because it helps everybody, and you can adjust it to fit everybody, and that's what makes it so special.
You want to show how?
The next one is Mr. Allen, and he's going to tell you a little bit of all the exciting things that are coming out in the computer world.
Well, sort of. As most people that know me know, I'm in it for the toys, you see. So the way we met Andy was Lauren and I were demonstrators at the 2013 AAW symposium in Tampa. And we just have to go to the demonstrator orientation session. So we go into the demonstrator orientation session, and there's a little buffet, some finger food and stuff that we didn't want to eat. And there were people seated around these tables. And there's a table over there that's got 2 people in wheelchairs and 2 people with canes. And we said, we're going to go sit with them, because this is going to be an interesting bunch of people to talk to. And this was that the first year that you did what was then called Woodturning with Disabilities? And we sat in on the session. I was in the audience with Lauren, and there was a woman in the audience that says, my husband had a stroke, and he lost the ability to use either his right arm or his left arm. And he said he'd like to continue turning. What can we do? And I, in the audience, said, well, you know, if you take one of these captured hollowing rigs, these articulated rigs that are used for like a monster rig or an elbow or whatever, and if that could be with some minor modification turned around so that it could hold the tool for you, support the tool, and then you would guide it with your other hand. And it occurred to me that part of being a wood turner is being the problem solver. We're trying to do things that don't necessarily, not necessarily obvious. And so there were a couple of things, and one of the, so my value add to this very often is, what can we do from a technological standpoint? What toys can we buy? What kinds of things can we do to help people that are not currently being well served? Because most of us are hobbyists. I tell people that if I was a professional wood turner, I probably wouldn't be able to afford to have wood turning as a hobby. So we're doing wood turning because we enjoy doing wood turning, not because we have to do wood turning. So what can we do to extend that enjoyment? It's kind of like playing pinball. If you play pinball really well, your reward is another ball, so you can keep playing. So how can we increase the enjoyment of the time that we spend at the lathe, and how can we just do this further into the future? Because we rebranded this wood turning with physical limitations, because as Andy said, it's not about you know, a stroke or something. It's about, I can't stay at my lathe as long, or I can't see as well, my eyesight is failing, or I can't grip the tool. We had Jeff Bennett here a couple of years ago, and Jeff at first didn't want to be on the panel because he had some malformation in his hand. He said, but I'm not disabled. It was a label that he didn't even want. He said, well, this is the way I have to hold the tool. But that's just the way he did it, as Troy says. It's not a matter of disability, it's a matter of just, this is what we have to do.
You have to find another way to do it.
Yeah, we find another way to do it. We had a fellow here last year or 2 years ago that adapted his rolling stool with a tractor seat, because that worked for him. It swiveled perfectly and it supported him well. So, so I'm going to show a couple of things, but one of the things that I explain to people is that I ride a motorcycle. And there are people that will ride a motorcycle in a t-shirt and flip-flops. I'm not that guy. I'm in full armored regalia, full face helmet, armored Kevlar suits, you know, I wear a conspicuity vest, you know, one of those like road hazard vests. I've got a helmet mounted wireless brake light on the back of my helmet. I wanted to make sure that people can see me. There's a thing called right of weight The bigger vehicle can do whatever it wants, you see. So part of dealing with disabilities is hopefully to avoid the disability in the first place. And so, although this thing here, I'll show this in a little bit, but part of, we know turners that can no longer turn. Why? Well, because now they're allergic to the wood dust, or they, or they just can't be around it anymore. And so part of extending your turning is to avoid this potential physical limitation. Get the lighting right so that you're not straining your eyes. Protect your hearing, protect your lungs, protect your face. And so during this conversation, we'll talk a little bit more about that and some cool toys. I've got one thing here. What can we do for people that are visually impaired? What can we do for people that have hearing impairment? What can we do to better serve people that are not currently being well served? So that's sort of where I bring into it. In fact, there's one thing I mentioned to Andy, talking about lighting, Cindy Drozda did a remote demonstration to one of my clubs. And people that know me know I'm into remote demonstration. And one of the ways that remote demonstrations is really useful to people is I know people that belong to clubs that never go to club meetings because they can't drive at night. So how do you increase that? There's a physical limitation, right? So how do you get them so that they can see the demonstration and things like that? So there's a lot that we can do. What Cindy had done is that she was hollowing out a little box, and she just took a little LED, a little 6 LED light that's magnetic, and she put it in the back of her tool rest. And it lit up the whole inside of the box. I'm saying, that's brilliant. You're not casting shadows, you're not trying to contort over it. So I asked her to make like a 1-minute video of that. So that's the kind of thing that we look at some of the tools that are out there. Can it make it easier for you to turn? Can it make your turning more enjoyable? So I've got a few things to show, but this session isn't so much a panel discussion as it is a discussion.
Yes.
You see, what works for you? And now I'm going to ask a question because he doesn't seem, is Emiliano in the room? Emiliano Achaval is a woodturner in Maui. And he asked me a question, and I said, well, why don't you just go ask Troy? And he said, well, I don't know, I'm a little embarrassed about the question. No, you shouldn't be embarrassed. So the question is, he says, Troy is coming to visit me in Maui. I've got a stubby lathe, which is up pretty high. What can we do to make it easier? What can we do to make it so that it works best for Troy? And I said, well, you could just lay the thing on its side. He said, no, it weighs 800 pounds. We're not going to tip it over. But so this is the kind of question that it should be a very matter-of-fact question rather than I'm afraid to breach the subject. Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm going to turn it over to you and say, well, what do you do when you come across a lathe that is not well suited for you? Because I mean, if it means building a ramp, let's build a damn ramp. And talk right into the end of the microphone. Thank you.
So I demonstrate in other clubs in New Zealand, and that is the question straight away is, are you going to bring your own lathe? Do we have to provide a lathe for you? And if we do, what do we need to do to get you to sit at that lathe? I have taken my lathe in the past. If I'm going for a number of days, I'll put my lathe on the trailer. If I go to a hands-on event, I'll definitely take my lathe. So it is portable. With help, I can unbolt it, put it on some wheels, put it on a trailer. All my gear is in rolling toolboxes and things like that, so I can pack up my wood turning portion of my workshop pretty quickly, within about an hour, load it on a trailer and leave. But generally, if I go to a club, I just get them to build a platform. So I just tell them to go down to your local hardware store and find some second-hand pallets or some throwaway pallets, and generally 2 pallets and a sheet of plywood is all I need to be able to sit at any standard lathe. It gets me near enough to the height I need. And then I have a set of ramps, portable fiberglass ramps, that I can use to get into houses or get up 2 or 3 steps. So if I go and stay with someone, I can get into their house or get up onto their deck to have a barbecue and a few beers. So I just take that ramp with me. So they just build a platform, I take my ramp, roll up onto the platform, and then I can turn it at any lathe. Yeah.
What do you use to keep from coming off the side of the ramp?
My fear of falling.
Well, you don't have like a lip built around where you would sense that with your chair. You just pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, pay attention, and I also make sure that the platform is big enough that I've got plenty of room to move, that I'm not restricted. So, so an 8x4 sheet is about spot on. And then generally I'll have a table that I've put gear on anyway, like I've got my gear laid out, and then I'll bring the grinder up. So by the time you've got the lathe in front, a table next to you and a grinder behind you, you're sort of caged in anyway. Yeah, so it's just,
you've defined your space.
yeah. The only thing that I do at the front is because most lathes have legs that are angled, I just ask them to extend the platform a little bit underneath the lathe, because when I wheel up to it, the platform can be short of the bed of the lathe. So I end up with just a small area of maybe a foot in front of the lathe where my front wheels could topple off when I wheel up to the bed, because I turn quite close to the bed of the lathe. Have to get in quite close to reach. Yeah, so it's quite a simple solution and a cost-effective solution.
Yeah.
So, and it's good because it means that I can go and turn at any club. They don't have to think, oh, we won't invite Troy because we don't have facilities for him. So it leaves the options open for me to be able to go and demonstrate further afield, or even if I got invited back to America to another American club, it's easy for them to set up for me. It's half an hour to make a very basic, cost-effective platform, and I'm up and turning just like anyone else.
So one of the things that I think is important is to ask people for things. Now, I have a video here. If we have some time, I'll show it. 2 years ago, I invited a fellow, Chuck Beland, to be part of our panel. And Chuck could not be here. He's in Rhode Island. And his physical limitation is that he's got essential tremors. And essential tremors is kind of like, he says it's Parkinson's, but it doesn't kill you. And so his hands shake terribly, and he doesn't mind. I refer to him as having a built-in chatter tool. But and so I've got a little video of him. If I say we can show that if you like, where it showed him trying to turn some spindle with some beads and coves, and just showing how bad the situation was, and one of the things that he did to mitigate that, which was to wear wrist weights and weighted gloves. So that helped quite a bit in weighting the chisel. Last year he came in remotely, and he had just had deep brain surgery to try to solve it, and it made a big improvement. But the lesson that he wanted us to take from his initial participation was that he wasn't so much worried about the turning. He was blowing up bowls and he was ruining spindles and such, but he says he was ruining his chisels when he was trying to sharpen them, because he's bouncing the chisels on the grinder. And he mentioned this on a wood-turning forum. And one of the guys in the wood-turning forum says, send me your chisels, I will make you a jig that you can put it in, and now it won't bounce. You can just turn it, and you can't ruin your chisels. And he says the thing that the big takeaway was, if you have an issue, ask people about it. People will come up with answers. And in this case, the guy just made him the jig, didn't charge him for it. He says, here, this is my pleasure to let you continue to do this, you see. So when we're talking between us here, it's partially to come up with some good solutions, or what works for you, the people in the audience, or what kinds of things are you struggling with or wondering about, and how can you help other people with this?
Each other?
Yeah, how can you help each other? That sort of makes sense? Yeah.
You
So
remember when you made that stick for me?
oh yeah,
The
there's
Z stick?
yeah,
I call it the Z
there's a
stick.
thing called the sticky stick. The first video that I ever made for the AAW, for the Woodturning Fundamentals program, and I'm a sucker for a good idea. And I saw someone, they took a piece of Velcro about 3 feet long, and they self-adhesive Velcro, and they stuck it on the side, on the bed of the lathe. facing the turner. And that way, when they take loop back abrasives, you can just stick them on the Velcro, and you stick them in order. And when I met Andy, she was, you know, when she was doing a pen, she would take a clip and hold the abrasives in order, and then do the sanding, and then replace it and such. So I had one of these sticks, and what I did is I took that same idea, and instead of putting the Velcro onto the lathe, I put it onto a 1-inch by like 3-foot long stick, a flat 3/4-inch square stick, and put magnets on the back of it. So we call it a sticky stick. Well, number one, it's a stick. Number two, the magnets make it sticky. The Velcro's sticky. The abrasives stick to it. Sticky stick, right? It's an old joke. What's brown and sticky?
A stick.
Stick, right. So I went to the 4th grade. So that's where I learned that stuff.
Did you graduate?
That's right. So what we did was, in fact, Molly Winton was at one of the booths, and I said, I want you to burn in, I think, our initial or something like that. And I gave this to Andy, so she can just stick it on the front of her lathe, put the abrasives in the right order, and then just take one abrasive off, do what she needs to do, put it right back. You know, you don't have to organize them. It takes up no desk space, and something as simple as that. I use it all the time as sighted, but for her, it just means she can just do this tactile and effortlessly. So that's the kind of thing where you start saying, well, when I came up with this, wasn't for someone that wasn't sighted, but when we look at Andy and say, oh, this would be cool for her too, you see. So that's sort of the way this, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And that to me is an important part of this for you.
What about the closed captions for like the club meetings, you know, where people can't always hear you real well? You have something like that, don't you?
Yeah, I'm going to try to do something here. Let me do two things. Let me get rid of this here, and I'm going to see if this works. Let me just turn on the captioning. If I go to start captioning, let's see if this will work. I'm not tied into the system here, so I'm just using a little headset microphone. And if I put this up, so here we are at the AAW Symposium in Raleigh, North Carolina. And you see that it's actually doing real-time closed captioning. And what's really cool about it is that it may come up with a word, and then a couple of words later, it realizes the context, and it will go back and fix the words that it solved. Like, you're looking for to, meaning the number, or to, meaning an excess of, or to, meaning a place to go. So that's kind of interesting the way it's doing it.
This is
so,
a phone app.
Is that what?
This is a phone app.
This is not a phone app. There is a website called Web Captioner, and the developer is using behind the scenes Google Translate, and or some Google rather not Google Translate, Google Speech Recognition, and we have an integration with the video mixer that I'm using, the vMix. Mike had asked the question, and so this in vMix is just another input that I'm using as an overlay. And there's some integration there where you tell the captioner what the web address is, and that's a recent change. So this would be good for people that are having difficulty hearing. It is easier than having somebody doing American Sign Language next to the computer, or you'd have to do it picture in picture. This is also good for someone on the trade show floor. May have stopped.
Still going.
Oh,
Still good.
someone on the trade show floor where it's very noisy, and you're playing a video or something like that, and you want the words to show up on the screen. So you think about what the applications could be of real-time closed captioning without having to hire a closed captioning service where you have somebody listening to the words and working like that. So this is
Someone using.
or someone signing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Gil.
It's funny you mentioned that. I just spoke to Johannes down on the floor.
What if you don't mind, Lauren? Would you what? Or yeah, Lauren's going to be microphone runner here.
Yeah.
Oh, Lauren, if you don't mind, run with 2 microphones.
Okay. Here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gil. I'm a member of Alan's Club. But I was just down on the floor speaking to Johannes, who everybody knows is the Hat Man. And I asked him if he's going to dinner tonight. He says, Gil, I'm not going because these venues, I can't hear. And the guy says to me, they should come up with a device that where, through the internet or some means, have a speaker on the table so we can hear. These venues are very large and echoes, and if you're impaired, it's troublesome. So you discourage. And here's a man that deserves to go, should go, but because of his hearing impairing. So we discussed it. So I shared it with Rob Wallace. But it's so funny that you're talking about it right now, either through a monitor on our tables in the future, something that we can get people like Johannes, who deserves to be there at our meal, and not have a hearing impaired problem. But it's,
By the way, it interpreted Johannes as Your Highness. So we will relay that to him.
but anyway, my pronunciation incorrect, but we know who we're talking about. But the issue was being spoken to between 2 people downstairs, and here you're talking about it. So it might be interesting to tell the AAW, just to get more people that don't go to the dinner because they can't hear, and and utilize this, because I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Well, we'll see. Wait, Lauren. I want you to take both of them because we're not tied into the sound system. We're trying to record at the same time.
Okay.
Hello, my name is George Wurtzel. A lot of people don't know too that own iPhones. In your iPhone, if you go to the accessibility setting, there's a setting in your iPhone if you happen to have Bluetooth headphones. You can you can set your iPhone up on the table where the speaker is speaking, and you can be somewhere else in the room, and it'll broadcast to your right directly into your ear, so you lose all that ambient sound noise that's around you in the room. So, and if you happen to have some of the new earbuds that Apple sells, you can put one in and listen to who the speaker is, and it doesn't block what's with you. But if you ever find somebody who you happen to notice has an iPhone, remind them there is a setting in your phone when you don't hear well that you can go to. It's in accessibility.
Let me also mention. Well, I'll just talk to this for a moment. Ed Preddy gave me a little video. He's doing remote demonstrations also, and when you're doing a demonstration, you don't want you're speaking into your microphone. You don't want to have a speaker in front of you because you don't want feedback and all that. And what he did is he just piped the audio from his computer into his Bluetooth hearing aids. Lauren and I both use we use noise canceling headphones, active noise canceling headphones, for a couple of reasons. But the other thing that we do is we have what's called bone conduction headphones, which sit in front of your ears. They sit on the temples in front of your ears. Audiologists use this all the time so they determine if you have a hearing problem and whether or not it's in your ear canal. This bypass of the ear canal goes directly into the bones. So for somebody that says, oh, you know, I can't hear very well, but I can't stand to have anything in my ear, these bone conduction headphones just sit and just lightly touch your temple. Mike.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Troy. I was thinking back when you said I think you were about 5 months into rehabilitation. I'm curious as to what impact that opportunity to turn impacted you emotionally or mentally when you first started wood turning, when you were probably still struggling through rehabilitation.
We're running back and forth with the microphones.
Yeah, definitely helped. Anything like that that gives someone some purpose or some sense of achievement can be a huge life-changing experience that can take someone from the brink, like someone who doesn't want to get out of bed in the morning. It can give them that little hope that they can actually do something. They are useful, you know, they're not useless. And I think, yeah, any sort of hobby, any sort of thing that you can be a part of, any group that you can be accepted into, is a huge, huge help for anyone going through a traumatic time, anyone suffering from depression. Yeah, it helped me a lot to know that I could still do something. One other thing I did when not long after I had my accident, maybe 12 months, we bought a house and we renovated that house, and I did quite a lot of the renovations myself, being a builder, as much as I could reach. I'd run around and do the skirting boards. Well, not run around, I'd roll around and do the skirting boards. Do any nogs that were high enough to reach. I'd cut the legs off my drop saw so I could sit at the drop saw and cut timber and cut nogs and skirtings, and nailed up all the weatherboard as high as I could nail the weatherboard, and remade and reframed doorways, rebuilt windows, and with the offcuts, the weatherboards on our house, the sidings on our house were native timber, very beautiful timber. So I cut them up and planed it all down and started making chopping boards. And then people wanted to buy those chopping boards, and then not long after that I started my own company, which I still run now. In my spare time, I work full time, making furniture and chopping boards as well. So there's that aspect of it too. It meant a lot to be able to just go out and do something on my own without any assistance. I think was also another big benefit.
Question? Yeah. I'll come. That's all right. I can use the exercise. Right into the end of the mic.
I'm Pete Fortin from Chesapeake, Virginia. And when I was looking at the closed captioning, I thought about my wife's mother who lives with us, and she has eyesight problems. She's not blind, but she has eyesight problems. And I was wondering if there is part of your technology that would allow you to enlarge or put a separate, panel up there and things like that, because, as I get older, I can see my eyesight, my glasses getting thicker and things like that.
Yeah, the developer who designed this gives you full control over the font, the formatting, the color, any of those things, and you can just go to webcaptioner.com, and it uses whatever microphone your computer is used to. Right now, normally I would tie in with my own microphone system, but for some reasons that we'll get to it another time, I'm just using my headset, my thing, and it's just laying on the table. So the fact that it's doing as well as it is doing is really kind of amazing. But yeah, when something says, well, this works, but it almost works for me, it's like almost everything I buy almost does what I want it to do. And then we start tinkering with it, and we make it our own, and we work from there. And so, yeah, that's very, very typical. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah. I'll come find you. I'll go this way. Right into the end of the mic.
I more have a comment than a question. My name's John Kelsey. I'm the current editor of Woodturning Fundamentals, where we're trying to feature answers to some of these problems. And I come at it from my own situation. I've been diagnosed a year ago with a not very pleasant illness. And the consequence of treatment is I'm not as strong as I used to be, and I can't stand up in one place as long as I used to be, and the nerves in my leg give out the way they didn't used to. I can't lift logs the way I used to, and everything like that. So I have a robust Scout, and I looked at old, but I have my own wooden stand, and I looked at old foot treadle lathes, and they pretty much always have what's called a man rest, a rail right at butt height, where you can drop your butt cheek on it while you tromp that treadle with your one foot. Otherwise, you're going to fall over after a while. You just have to balance. So I've been experimenting with a man rest behind my lathe so that when I'm working on something close where I don't have to do the woodturner sway and the dance, I can lean on my butt rest and I can get enough motion to do what I need to do and get right down there and see the work. I'm not changing my height. I'm not sitting down at a stool. I'm just getting myself the tripod support I need, and I'm not having it in one place like I would have with a fixed stool, but rather on a sloping 2x4 rail behind my lathe. And I have no idea what the optimum form factor for that thing is, because I'm on Mark II of it right now, and by about Mark IV I might have something that I can publish. The other thing that devils me is I can't lift the damn log. I can't do the kind of chainsaw log acrobatics I used to do. And what I've been doing about that is asking guys in our club to help. And that has been very, very rewarding. It's not only as you become disabled and you need to get into the taking up turning and being in the world turning helps you, it also helps us not get old so fast.
All right, let me run over to you. I'll come visit. We've got time. This is for you. Right into the end of the mic.
Okay. I'm Jim Duxbury, and I'm an inventor. I've invented all kinds of things. In fact, Lauren has a video of my respirator. I invented a mouthpiece respirator. I'm not here to sell respirators, but first off, I find it really, as an instructor, I was honored to instruct Andy in one of her classes at Aramont. And I learned more from that than I'd ever learned from any of the other classes. I now, rather than look at a piece, I feel a piece. You feel a piece much better than you can see it. Some of the tools they use are scrapers. And if you can't see very well, when you go to put a scraper in to make a cut, especially in a hollow form, you could have it upside down. So I took the scraper, I got home and I started thinking about that, and I took my scraper over and I set it on a belt sander and sanded the back of it up. So when you pick it up, it references in your hand. You can pick it up behind your back. Hearing, I have a problem. I don't know where to start with this because I do a demonstration on hearing. It's too bad that there's no more, that we don't handle the problem in the first place. I found, I have a long list of woodturners in my family. My grandfather was a Finnish carpenter in England, and everybody worries about power tools. It affects your ears. You lose your hearing with power tools. You have to have earplugs and all that stuff. My grandfather was hard of hearing. My grandfather never had a power tool in his hand. There wasn't such a thing. He made everything by hand, and he's hard of hearing. He was hard of hearing because of driving spikes. When you hit a spike with a hammer, there's a little concussion. It bounces your eardrum. And I found the same thing with all kinds of things. Rule of thumb with ear protection, the cheaper it is, the better it works. You buy a $60 pair of noise-canceling earphones, and they do an 18 to 20 dB reduction in hearing. You buy a 30-cent earplug, you get a 33 dB deduction. All kinds of that stuff. I wish there was more. I wish you could see Lauren's video to handle the problem in the first place. But it has been such an eye-opener working around people like that it's made me a much better person and a much better woodturner. And it's wonderful to help. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Jim, as a matter of fact, we spoke on the phone after we published that video. You and I did speak on that. That was me. Yeah, that was me.
It just dawned on me.
And I'm saying that's it. Yeah, Malcolm.
Where is this published on the web so one can see?
The video is on the AAW website, and it's only a couple of minutes long. If we got a little time, I'd be happy to play it.
If you go to fundamentals, an issue last year with a live link to it and also a PDF version.
That'd be worth
What-
I'm not too.
1 second, we got comment here?
No,
Oh.
Jim, tell them about your chain lift, because I
Oh.
couldn't lift it at
Well,
tailstock.
I have a Powermatic 3520, and the tailstock on these things probably weighs 80 pounds. And I struggle with it, and I'm getting a bad back like the rest of them, and it's harder for me too. My wife wants to use it, and she can lift it, but that's everything she can do. So I started looking at buying this $300 hinge that you have to, I don't know, hinges. It only takes it part way out of the way. And that didn't seem to be the answer to the problem. So I took the washer that's underneath, the round washer, and I cut the sides off of it. And then I made a handle, a little wire handle that indexes that thing, comes up, and I drilled a hole in the side of the tailstock, and I made a wooden handle, and there's a little spring on this thing. So you release the tailstock, pull this lever, and then tighten the tailstock. And that turns this washer sideways 90 degrees, and when you tighten it, it brings it up between the ways. And then on the top of the tailstock, I have a 3/8 eye bolt drilled and tapped into it. And I have a $75 chain or a hoist, electric hoist from Harbor Freight or something. And you push a button and the hook comes out of the ceiling and hooks on it. You push a button and it goes up to the ceiling. So it just works fabulous. You can also use that same chain, that lift, put a sling around your wood and mount that between your centers. The worst case of poison ivy I ever got, I got a piece of wood on the way home. I had a project in the back of my head I was going to do. On the way home, they were cutting trees down, and I said, I need a piece of wood. And the guy came over, he'd be glad to cut me up a couple pieces of wood. It was one of those 100-degree days, and I got home, and I was in Bermuda shorts and a T-shirt, and I'm going to put that thing right on my lathe and make it right away. So I got this big chunk of wood, and I had both arms around it, my leg underneath it. And it's not nice to see sometimes in my shop. But anyway, the next day, I had poison ivy down both arms and all down my leg. I was a mess. But it is really, it's fun to come up with inventions or different things that make it work for other people too. But I wish the problem would be handled at the base, and we don't do any of that. It's not exciting, and chips aren't flying, but safety in the first place is just the respirator. I'm not just selling a respirator. Some of the things that are sold shouldn't even be. When you put it on, you think you're protected, and you're not. And as a manufacturer, I'm like talking against other products, but in a safety product, when you put it on, it's got to work. Otherwise, you think it's working, and you go into the dust, or you go into the noise, and you whatever else, and it's not working.
I'll bring Mike over. Yeah, in fact, one of the things that we pointed out in the video was that a regular paper dust mask, on the label it says, "This is not breathing protection." So that's pretty embarrassing. Ellen, we're talking. Eat the microphone, right into the microphone.
I'm Ellen Davis, and I'm the president of the Montgomery County Woodturners. And I want to talk about two things. One, I want to address that because I have a member who's actually dying because of that. Because through the years, over 40 years of turning, though wearing some level of covering, not through everything, but got a lung infection from some sort of wood that is stopped him from turning about 3 years ago, is on oxygen, and comes to the meeting, wears full face, everything, sits in the back in order to be in the meeting. So we have found ways to do that, but you're absolutely right. My biggest concern is, for me, is I love the fact that on the robust, you can adjust heights, you can do all of that. That's fantastic. When you're on a budget, that becomes an issue. And we talk about the fact, okay, what happens if you can't see, if you can't stand, if you're getting older, if you can't hear? There was one very brief conversation about if you can't hold the tool very well. And so personally, for me, it's my tool handling. I've had both arms, clavicles taken off. I have a fusion in my neck. I retore my rotator cuff 2 months ago.
You should stop doing some of that stuff.
Yeah, well, life is what it is. I'm made of toothpicks and spit inside. So for me, it's a matter of how do I continue to turn when I'm dealing with a level of pain, when I know once I step up to the lathe, I know that I can do X. May not be pretty anymore or ever was, but I have to be okay with what comes out, but I also have to know what my own limitations are. And I don't think we talk about that enough either. I'm still finding my limitations. And because of Gil, actually, my abilities at the lathe were better after I took a class, and Gil helped me learn how to move the pieces closer to me, and that was extremely helpful. Nobody, and I have not been turning very long in the grand scheme of things, but even in other classes, nobody talks about how do you make it easier. We just go in and we sit there like this, and we move the tools at funky angles, and we lean over our lathes. And so you're absolutely right. When we talk about how do we deal with it before it happens, I think any new turner should be taught not just how to hold your tool, but how to stand, how to sit, and how do we help manufacturers make lathes that, again, affordable or even more affordable, or have more abilities to make that easier. So I would like to know how to turn without pain. That's personal.
Yeah, so
Right into the end.
I could address a couple of those things, certainly not all of them. The stand that we normally make for this lathe, for the universal stand, I call it the universal stand because we sell about half of those stands to people who are putting like a jet mini lathe on them or something like that. So, I mean, for the lighthouse, for Andy, we donated a stand to them, and then they put, was it a jet mini lathe that you put on top? So you have to kind of supply your own adapter boards to go across the top, but we've had people put anything from a jet 1642 down to a jet mini lathe or a Rikon or something like that. So you have all that adjustability in the stand that you can put a less expensive lathe on. And there's nothing patented about my design either, and it's something that, I've seen other people looked at the design of the universal stand and then built one out of plywood or built one out of 2x4s, and I think that's great. So that's a low cost option to get the lathe where you like it to be. And one of the great speakers about turning ergonomics was one of the founders of AAW, David Ellsworth, and David will speak at length about the ergonomics of turning and tool presentation and posture, and go through exercises with you to loosen up, like you're an athlete going out for a run. You want to loosen and stretch before you do your thing. So maybe next year getting David to come in and talk about turning ergonomics and what have you. And I have a question that I want to ask Troy, but then Gil wants to talk too. So one of the things I wanted to ask.
If I can add to just what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
I want to.
On that subject.
Yeah. So in that vein of the things that you were talking about, I wanted to ask Troy about his tool handle length, Because I found when I was turning from a seated position to try to get an understanding of what that's like, because I don't need to turn from a seated position, one of the things I found out was my tool handles were all too long. And I was going to say, Troy, how long are your tool handles? So I'm going to turn it over to Troy.
That's also for short people, by the way.
Also for short people, absolutely.
Short people, tool handles generally are too long.
Yeah. Right into the end of the mic, if you don't mind.
Yeah, tool handles can be a big issue, especially when you're sitting. I find using a bowl gouge or a hollowing tool, the long handle is effective because it gives me more leverage, and I'm holding the bowl gouge generally away and it's coming towards me, and I can keep it locked in under my arm and keep it nice and steady, which takes a lot of stress off my wrists, and it gives me a lot more support. When I'm doing spindle work, in spindle work you come across in front of you and you don't want to move all the time. So I use shorter tools, spindle tools. I use the short crown or the hunter tools, Hamlet tools, sorry. They have a shorter wooden handle and a shorter shaft, and I find them a lot more effective for a skew chisel, a parting chisel, a spindle gouge, some of the little round nose scrapers, and I've made my own little negative rake scrapers for different forms that I turn. When I learned I was coming to America, I invested in these woodcut handles, which are a collet system, and they have bare tools that will go into there, like spindle gouges and skews and roughing gouges and parting tools. And I thought, well, that's great, but that handle's just too long. I can't turn like I normally would with my spindle tools at home, and I don't want to take my spindle tools to America. So I thought about it and thought, well, all that is a piece of stainless steel tubing with a plastic plug in the end. So what would it matter if I just cut the end off it? So I went and bought another handle and just cut it down. And that will still effectively hold the bowl gouge, but it'll hold a spindle gouge, a parting tool, a skew chisel, a roughing gouge, and it means that I can turn across in front of myself. So just a simple modification, and I think that's one thing we should look at, or people should look at, is not being scared to modify tool handles. If you have arthritis and you can't hold a narrow tool, get some foam and some insulation tape and build the tool handle up to a bigger diameter to be able to help. We're talking about tooling to help blind people find the right orientation of the tool, and how you sanded the top so that they could feel the top. This is one of Rolly Munro's hollowing tools. His new ones have this flat facet on the top, and his handle is molded in a way that your hand only fits into it in one way. So you know when that is inside the hollow form, because if you're turning through a narrow opening, you're turning by braille anyway. You can't see in there. You're just turning by feel. And you know that the tool needs to be over on about a 30-degree angle, so you just naturally tilt your hand. So an idea like that of a handle that can only be held in a certain way, or even his older tool never had the flat facet, but it had a big plastic nut on top, so you could slide the tool in, change the length of the shaft, and you could lock it off. So you used to just lock the nut on top, so you could put your thumb on it and you knew when you were down inside the angle of your tool. So there could be a simple way to modify certain handles to make them really useful for people that were impaired.
When about 2 years ago, Lauren and I made a video for the AAW called "The Anatomy of a Wood Lathe," and this is the tail stock, this is a head stock, this is the banjo and all that stuff, and in we show her turning for about 40 seconds in the video, and we got a comment from somebody, a well-known turner, that says her lathe is up too high. And I said, no, it's not. It should be like at elbow height. The spindle should be at elbow height. Well, that's fine if you're a bowl turner. But we typically turn things like jewelry. So we're turning things that are this big. And you don't want to be stooping down to look at this thing. I've got several 3D printers. All my 3D printers, the bed of the printer is up at 41 inches because I don't want to, looking at that first layer is very important. I don't want to bend down. Most people's grinders are way too low. They should be up near eye level. That's where you're working with this thing, and you're trying to look at the bevel. So sometimes the conventional wisdom, they're just guidelines for general purpose. But if you're shorter or you're taller or the nature of what you're doing, if you're doing finials, why not get the thing up? Because you're not rocking back and forth. You're not doing typical bowl and baluster work. Get it to the right height for you, and think about what the right height is. By the way, Emiliano, I asked them the question before. Gil, you had a question?
So Brent, you're going to have to create hydraulics. Sorry, no, Gil wants to talk. You're going to have to create hydraulics for different heights.
It's just a matter of cost. You
Yeah.
wanted it cheap, and now
No,
you
not
want
cheap.
it
No, not cheap. I happen to love the American Beauty. It's my favorite. But
Put in an escalator. All right.
Once again, Ellen mentioned turning, and we're so focused on making a piece that we forget everything. Your body tells you a lot of things in the process. I have a course that I teach at my club, body mechanics at the lathe. I'm a 30-some-odd-year practitioner of Tai Chi. I started it before I had my hip replaced. I'm a member of my club 20 years. I believe it was 18 years ago, David Ellsworth came and gave us a demo. And he was sharing with us that he was at Aramont, and he was watching these people do these movements, Tai Chi, and he joined in. And he says, very similar movements at the lathe. Well, I had been practicing Tai Chi up until a long time then. I said, David, I practice Tai Chi. So he's kind of gave me an idea where I was going with this workshop. So he said, get your hip replaced and apply everything you know about Tai Chi at the lathe. So when someone comes to my shop for a demo of some sort, or learn how to learn about body mechanics, they're like, what are you going to learn? And just by a simple placement of, everybody approaches the lathe fairly square. Well, the joints work in a certain way. To move left to right, I would turn slightly left to right, and my knees work this way. So we get lost about making an object, not really using the body correctly. And we end up fatigued. At Aramont, they had robots, they had Powermatics, and they're making platters. Dennis Fuge was given the class. I was on the floor helping people out. After the first day, I watched everybody struggling. I said, wait a minute, Denny, can I open up the class? I said, you guys got very expensive equipment here, and nobody's using it correctly. Took all the heads, slid them to the end. Ellen had a great breakthrough. She said, I'm not bending over.
I was like,
They were so locked into making something, they didn't know the equipment they had. And we get lost in making a product and not realizing, hey, I'm 4 hours turning, I'm tired. Well, your body's saying something. Listen to it. We lose ourselves. Like I said, the senses are alive. They're telling you when something's burning, you smell it. Something's coming at you, get out of the way. You hear something, your senses are constantly telling you things, and we don't pay attention. You hear something you don't like to hear, you shut off. So I like opening up the senses at the lathe, teaching you tool control, tool edges, so that you can make anything. But we forget that this is the main principle when we know nothing about this. We get locked into our phones, we get locked into our lathe. But the body, everything's been made based on us. Computers, well, the brain, right? So it's fascinating to see that how much we're so locked into what we're doing externally and not going internally. And I've had the privilege to take my lessons from masters that have taught me so much about posture, alignment, and I'm a carpenter by trade. This is what I used to do. And I'm getting older, and I have arthritis and all, but I still apply those principles. And when my body's tired, stop.
Now, was it 2 years ago you were on this panel? Was it 2 years ago? Something
Yes.
like that. And so there's a video on the AAW video website, the Vimeo channel, where he spends quite a bit of time talking about the Tai Chi and such. So you can visit that and get a more in-depth, because we also, at that time, we were talking about teaching people that were veterans and such. So there were some very interesting discussions. You should go back and watch some of these other discussions, because it really runs the gamut for education.
And by the way, I'm a disabled veteran, and that's what saved me. I couldn't work at the trades anymore, so I looked at other things. I turned in school when we were kids, and I said, well, I got to do something other than. And I am the advocate to let any veteran know that there's a program out there improving the quality of your life. 2001, I believe, 2011, there was an article written on me, Veteran Turner, and what it was is not so much about me, but the opportunity that's at the VA. And it was only strictly shared by people going to meetings. The VA is there. If you don't knock on the door, nothing works. So if you know of any veteran, I just did a walkthrough with the Wounded Warriors today, and I shared with them. A $6,800 one-way was delivered to my house because I participated in that program. The ability to speak, the ability to teach, it was all given to me, but until I knocked on that door, nothing happened. So I become a big advocate to help the disabled veterans and kids that don't see woodturning today. They're fascinated, but they don't have it in school. But so if anyone has a family member, please direct them towards me so I can help them out. There's a bunch of Wounded Warriors that are 100% permanent total, and they didn't even know about this program. One or two had bought a lathe. I said, get in touch with me, we'll get you a bigger lathe. So it's available, but once again, it's through sharing, not keeping it to yourself. And if you look at that publication, my number's in there, and please get in touch with me, and I can gladly help them. I'm a bit of a pit bull for helping our community that's not getting the help they deserve.
I want to just jump back to the computer for a moment, because I wanted to show I'll get to the question in a moment. I just wanted, because this gives some people a chance to take a look at something. And this is that cartooning filter that I was talking about. Again, it may just give you some chance to think about this a little bit. If I cut to this, so this is something that was me working, I think, with a Vermeck sphere jig, and so this is a typical thing that you would see: full color, normal, sharp image. Now, picture somebody that has very limited visual acuity. So what I did is I applied what's called a cartoonizer filter to it. So you'll see about 15 seconds into it. Oh, yeah, there it goes. About 15 seconds into it, what it's going to do is there. So you see how it's doing the edge detection? On the cone, you can see it in particular. So that's normal. And I think I jumped back into that. Well, let me just jump back there. See the difference? Now, for some people, that difference could be really important. And one of the first things that I suggested to Andy was for her lighthouse for the blind to take a camera and put it over the lathe and put up a big screen monitor, because a lot of the people have some sight, they have some visual ability, but they can't see up close. So, and especially the people that are not turning, that are sort of waiting their turn to turn or just watching somebody else, why not be able to put that up on the screen so that they can see it easier? Well, the next step in that is to put a computer into the mix and process the video. Just like in Windows, you could say, well, you know, white background with black text works for most people, but it doesn't work for everybody. Maybe you need white text on a black background. Emiliano, I was doing a video remote session with him looking at the video mixer that we use. And this video mixer has two windows. One has an orange title bar and one has a green title bar. So you know which is your program window and which is your preview window. And I look at his, and his is like yellow and purple or something like that. And I said, are we having some difficulty with the video feed because we got these really weird colors? He said, no, I'm colorblind. I can't tell the difference between the red and the green. And in the company that I work for, it's called Club Express, we facilitate enthusiast clubs. There was a new procedure that was coming up where things that had not yet been done, that had a little red box, a little red circle next to it, and when you were finished with that step, if you were completed, it would turn to a green circle. And I said, you got to have a check mark or an X in the middle of it, because a lot of people can't distinguish between the red and the green. And once you just start thinking about how can you make this accessible to more people, then all of a sudden it just becomes a very matter of fact. But nobody had even considered it. And his changing of the user interface, to me, was a great reminder of something as simple as color blindness. So that's kind of a cool thing. We have more questions, and if you want, I can always play that video for you.
I've got some more I can add.
Okay, let's come over to Deborah first, and eat the microphone. Come right in close to the microphone.
Yum.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Deborah Fortin, and Gil, I believe? Yes. Thank you for your service and for any other veterans that may be here. And I have a question about if anybody has any suggestions for carpal tunnel. And Troy, you had mentioned something about putting the handle under your arm, and maybe that would help alleviate stress on the wrist.
So let's bring this back.
So yeah, if you can, any bit of support you can give yourself while you're turning is definitely going to help. My mentor suffers from arthritis in his wrists, and he uses physiotherapy tape on his wrists. And if he didn't use that, he couldn't get through a day of working in his workshop or working on the lathe. So that extra support to stiffen his wrists still gives him movement, but it locks it up and gives his wrist some support so he doesn't get so much pain. But when I'm at the lathe, I'll get as much support or as much balance as I can when I'm turning. So if I'm turning a bowl, I'll get them as close as I can and tuck that under my arm to help me turn. If I'm hollowing, I'll use the tailstock and I'll lean against it to hollow out if I need to lean across the bed. Anything I can do to help myself. If I'm sanding, I power sand with a drill. I slide the banjo back with the tool rest, and I'll rest my wrist on the tool rest to give me some more support. So I'm just moving from the wrist instead of trying to hold my whole arm or try and lean and balance. That gives me some more balance, and it locks my wrist in to be able to move more. Yeah.
Question? I get a good workout here. Where am I going? Well, let's do you in the front first. Okay. And then, go ahead.
Hi, Rick Bucker.
Right into the end of the mic.
Hi, Rick Bucker. A question for Brent or others about, the more I try to stand up for long periods at the lathe, the longer, the harder it becomes. So I had questions about kind of sitting in like a higher chair, or, any, comments for, short periods, or, definitely Scout or something, could be an option. But I just didn't know what others may be doing, maybe sitting in like a chair or something while they're turning, or any comments anybody has.
Have anything particular?
Well, I talk to people who use a lot of different chairs. People have asked us to make like a captive chair that somebody like Troy would transfer into, and I just, liability flashes above in my eyes, like having a guy transfer out of his wheelchair into some sort of a captive chair by the lathe, and I think I don't want to go there, so I know that people will turn like on a bar stool. And it was kind of like what John was talking about, having a what'd you call it, a butt bar?
You got a tool rest, you also need a man rest.
Yeah, a man rest. So having a rod across there, and I have seen old treadle lathes where they do just that, where you have it's not really a chair, but it's a support for your hind end, where you don't get yourself any shorter, but you just give yourself some support in that way. And
Just high enough to put your butt cheeks on it.
yeah, just high enough to put your butt cheeks on it. And that's not a bad way to go. One of the things with wheels is if you're going to be moving around a lot and you got shavings on the floor it's hard to do casters. So like the little casters that you see on office chairs don't really make it, and you might want to get a chair. You might want to rig up a chair with some bigger casters on it, and something that you can move on and support yourself with. So, and I know there's some
Yep.
other people got
Yep.
some ideas on that.
Where am I going? Okay. All right, I'm going to come pay you a visit again. Again, eat the microphone right into the end of the microphone.
Okay. I wanted to say about the carpal tunnel business, the kind of wrist braces they sell at the drugstore that have a kind of a metal spoon that tucks into the palm of your hand, they're designed to hold your wrist in what's called a neutral position, which puts the least stress on it and gives you the most efficient use of whatever muscles and bones that you've still got. I often wear one of those not only because of carpal tunnel and bad wrists, but also it helps train me to hold my tools in the most efficient and least harmful to me way. And it's not always a natural habit. We get into the habit of cocking our wrist and working with funny angles like this, and that will do more damage than anything else, and really fatigue you fast. So if you can, I found it a great help to use those just $20 braces from the drugstore they're meant to ease carpal tunnel, just to help me learn how to hold my hand so it doesn't hurt.
Yep.
I can kind of piggy off on that.
Wait. Okay, right into the end of the mic.
Hello, I'm Ian Sermon, and I'm a UNCG music student. So, as a musician, I'm a clarinet player. I have to make sure that I'm using my body correctly. And I just wanted to say for you, the one struggling with carpal tunnel, maybe you could get a massage. Those can be really good for helping detoxify. But also, there are people in communities that do energy work and stuff like that, and that can really help to fine-tune your energy and the way it's working. But since I came to that university, I studied under a professor named Anthony Taylor, and he teaches this concept called Alexander technique. Yeah. And that technique is about learning to redesign the way you use your body externally, because a lot of us, we go throughout our day and we're not really thinking about how we, even how we walk or how we sit down or how we, it's all ingrained. And so you can, I think with wood turning, it's a lot about, feeling, what feels bad, why does it feel bad, and then questioning that, trying to understand why it hurts, and making subtle adjustments. And also to piggyback on what could help with the carpal tunnel, Qigong. I've taken a couple Qigong classes, and I took a music education course, and when I was playing the violin in that course, it was a string methods course, I couldn't really, play the violin very well because I didn't have the stretch in my wrist, and I got something in my, it was, the doctors did say it was carpal tunnel, but they thought I should not play the violin anymore. And for about a year, I had trouble with this wrist. And after taking those classes for 3 weeks, I had immediate improvement. So I just recommend, just to try to just, look for some kind of class that could help. I mean, there's a lot of people, I think, in the communities that are here to help us. And if we take advantage of them, we can really learn a lot and help others.
Cool. Now, I'd like to, I'll come back here. We have probably about 12 minutes or so left. Is that about right? A couple of things that we can do, and we can run a little bit over it. There's nobody coming in this room afterwards. I wanted to just show that 1 minute thing about this light, that LED light that might be useful. If you want the a video about personal protection equipment is a 7-minute video. You don't have to do that, but I'm just saying that's an option to how we want to close out the session. And George, right into the end of the mic.
If you're looking for good, low, inexpensive ways to build lathe access for people who are in wheelchairs or have to sit or different kinds of things, a couple different times that we've taken and mount unistrut right on the wall, and then just 2 pieces of angle coming out from your unistrut. Then you don't have any legs underneath whatsoever. And then you also have the option, if it's on unistrut, you can just loosen the bolts up, slide the thing up and down, and set it at whatever height you want. I've taught some deaf blind people before, and that requires coming up with some sort of language, to tap them on the shoulder, right, left, up, down, those kinds of things. The other thing is about tool holding. I've noticed that a lot of different people, the tool handles are way too small for a lot of people who have trouble holding onto handles. Putting the insulation wrap from insulation for pipe wrap on tools works real good. It's a softer hold, plus makes it a larger diameter. And you happen to be a wood turner, turn some larger diameter handles. It works.
Let me just very briefly, I think this video is only about a minute.
Welcome to my woodworking shop. I'm Cindy Drozda. I'd like to show you a little gizmo that I make called a micro light. It really helps me get the light right where I need it for my wood turning. It's a little LED with a couple of magnets on the back, and it can stick to anything ferrous metal. Inline switch, turn it on, and we've got light, and plenty of it. So let's do some turning, and I'll show you how I use this micro light. I'm hollowing out this finial box here. And the micro light really makes it easy to see what I'm doing, getting that little nub out of the inside bottom. I can also put the light right on the tool.
So that's the whole thing. And I thought that was really useful because, again, you're not bending over trying to get away from another light or whatever. It was just effortless to put on the light. Yeah, that if it was a matter of I have to go get something in position, she just took it and put it on, and then she was able to use it. So you want to make this stuff easy. You had something you wanted to chat about?
There was a few just points that I wanted to add to. You had said about people not utilising the technology or the machinery they have correctly. When I first started turning, I bought my first lathe, which was a TL 1500. It was one of the early Technitool lathes, and it was the first Technitool lathe that had a rotating head on it. And I think it took me about 4 years until I actually started rotating the headstock. And now I have a DVR with a rotating headstock, and I turn the headstock all the time. For hollowing out a bowl or hollowing out a hollow form, I find it's really useful to bring the work out towards me. And the same with Brent's robust lathe, the fact that it tilts everything towards you so you're not stretching and leaning and putting your body in an awkward position. And I started finding after I was doing more and more turning and spending more time at the lathe, I was getting a sore back and getting tired because I was leaning and resting and putting myself in an awkward position all the time. With the lathe tilting towards you or the headstock rotating, you're bringing everything to you rather than you going to it. You talked about options for low impact turning or ways to do things that make things easier. I know Glenn Lucas talks a lot about techniques that he uses to make the job easier for him. He's a production turner, and at his height I think he was turning 2,700 bowls a year. So days and days and days at standing at the lathe, and he was finding that there were certain things that he was doing that he just couldn't do. Like he now turns left-handed with a push cut and pushes away from him because he was turning so much that turning the normal way with the shavings hitting his hand was actually wearing the skin off his hand, and his hand would bleed and he'd have to wear a glove. So he changed his stance and learned to turn differently to get the shavings away from him. He also talks a lot about stance with his leading foot, moving into the most awkward position initially, and then coming very quickly into the right position, but all he's doing is dropping his knee to do that move. So he's worked out a right stance for him that makes turning for long periods of time easier for him. I was teaching today in one of my demos. They asked about the thin bowl, if I get a lot of vibration and flex in the side of the bowl, and I showed them that I only have to hold the chisel with 2 fingers on the end, and I really only need to rest my hand on the top of the tool. The type of grind that I use and the technique I use means I don't have to cling onto the tool and force it into the wood. The chisel's doing the cutting. I can even cut with just one hand on the outside of a bowl, because just the way I've developed my grind is very similar to Stu Batty's 40-40 grind. The tool does a lot of the work and takes a lot of the effort out of it. So I think it could be something that the AAW might want to look at as a fundamental video to get some turners together and maybe show some of these things that make it easier for them long term to turn. The other thing I do with roughing down spindle work I was showing yesterday, and I'll be showing it in a demonstration tomorrow, most people rough a spindle blank across the blank like that. So you're turning a lot of fresh air and you're getting a lot of hammering from the wood. It's just natural, that's what's going to happen. When I rough a blank, I use a bowl gouge and I rough down towards the spindle. So with every cut, the further I cut down, I'm getting more and more bevel contact, and I get less and less hammering in the tool, and it's really easy and really quick. The other good thing with roughing that way is it throws the shavings away from me. There's less chance of it splintering a corner off the wood and it flying and hitting me in the hand, hitting me in the face, the arm. It takes all that risk away. I've got more and more support for the tool, and the wood has support as I cut that spindle. Once it's down to nearly round, it's just one simple cut to cut back and you've got a round cylinder. So there's lots of little tips and tricks that I think there could be some real value in putting a short fundamentals video together to demonstrate some low impact turning suggestions.
There are 2 resources that you may want to look into. One is, and I don't know where it is right now because it changed a couple of months ago, on the AAW forum. We had an area for woodturning with physical limitations. I don't know if that got incorporated into another area, but there are some discussions there.
Yes.
And up on the screen there is a community that I started about a year ago called Lucid Woodturners. And Lucid Woodturners is all about good ideas. It's mostly about using technology in with your projects, whether they be using lasers or 3D printers or video or whatever. But the key here is turners using technologies to advance their craft and make wood turning accessible to more people. So we have a general discussion area there. So if you've got something to say, oh, I put in this light and it's working this way, or I did something, this is also a good place to have some very interesting conversations. It's free. You can just sign up, and we're happy to have you. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left in our schedule, so there are a couple of things. As I say, I can play out this this video if you like, and also I suspect we can invite everybody up to take a really close look at the scout and the stand. So maybe Brent can show how this thing gets adjusted and such.
Well, that stand is a special one for Troy.
Oh, this one's a
so
special
that isn't our
one.
normal-
Well, actually, do you want me to just play the little video to show people like this?
If they want.
I think it's pretty quick. Let's take a quick look.
Holes are provided if you want to bolt the stand to the floor or add leveling pads. The center section doubles as a tool rack. There is also a tool rack on the top of each leg. Here we see the universal stand adjusted for a seated turner. We've dropped the height and tipped the lathe forward for a more natural tool presentation. It only takes a few minutes to make these adjustments, but it is best to take the lathe off the stand first. The universal stand is readily adapted to other lathes with the addition of user-supplied adapter boards. We just use 2x4s and lag bolts to fit this Nova to the stand. Your solution might be more elegant.
Were you able to get the sense of that? Okay.
It's great.
Any kind of closing words? And as I say, I'll be happy to run that personal protection if you'd like. I can do that. It runs for about 7 minutes. You would not be upset if you walk out.
I got to run back.
Well,
I've got to get away as well. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's no problem. But it's available on the AAW website, or even just search for personal protection equipment. It's called that for wood turners, and you'll see all sorts of really cool stuff. Yes. Any closing words, Andy?
Every year we're working with the AAW to get physical limitations better and better and more in the mainstream where we can all share our thoughts, because we do learn from everybody and each other. Thank y'all for coming.
I also just wanted to say, if anyone did have any questions about helping seated turners, or had any questions about sitting at the lathe or turning from a seated position, to just get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have, or any concerns, or if you're just wondering about something or how I do something. I'm more than happy to speak to anyone. So my contact details are just troygrimwood.com. You can find me through that. There's some cards down on my stand, and I think the AAW, you'll be able to track down my contact details as well. So yeah, always feel free to get in touch.
Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.